Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. When we think of battle and casualties from the Civil War period and the primary source records, letters, diaries, newspapers, books, we often hear the stories of the soldiers talking about their comrades who were desperately wounded and the horrific stories connected with them as they were dying. And rightly so. These individuals, these soldiers, were the first ones to be caregivers for their comrades who were desperately wounded in battle. But what about the women who were nurses that came from all walks of life to help take care of the injured during the aftermath of battles? And there were thousands of them in the Union Army. One of them is pictured here. Her name is Georgiana Georgy Woolsey. She preferred the nickname Georgy. From New England. And her and her mother, Jane, arrived in Gettysburg not long after the battle to care for injured soldiers under the auspices of the U.S. Sanitary Commission. For 3 weeks in July 1863, they worked to alleviate the sufferings of their patients, and for those who were beyond help, were there for them, gave them comfort in their final hours. They took care of both U.S. soldiers and Confederate soldiers, treating them the same, exactly the same. She wrote a book, well, a booklet, about 24 pages long, at the urging of friends to describe what happened, what she experienced, what her and her mother experienced after Gettysburg. That booklet is called 3 Weeks in Gettysburg, and you can find it online. It's free, it's a digital download. It was published by the Sanitary Commission. They ordered 10,000 copies to distribute to women across the North to keep them up so they could continue donating supplies and monies to support the soldiers in the field. In that 24-page booklet has some of the most poignant stories that I've read about nurses and their relationship with the men who were wounded. And this one, of course, at Gettysburg. In Georgie's booklet, she describes one of the soldiers, a Confederate soldier that didn't make it. His name is Lieutenant Henry Josiah Rauch. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, Rauch, of the 14th South Carolina Infantry. Desperately wounded, mortally wounded, he was not going to make it. His brother, Corporal Samuel Noah Rauch, was captured during the battle and present with his brother when the time came. So I want to share the passage from Georgie's book that describes her encounter with the Lieutenant Henry as he was in his final hours. So here's the passage. Quote, late one afternoon, too late for the cars, trains, an ambulance, train of ambulances arrived at our lodge with over 100 wounded rebels to be cared for through the night. That's because, and I'm going to interrupt here, that's because they missed the train heading out of Gettysburg and had to take care of the wounded until the next train came in the morning. So that's where we are. Only one among them seemed too weak and faint to take anything. He was badly hurt and failing. I went to him after his wound was dressed and found him lying on his blanket, stretched over the straw. A fair-haired, blue-eyed young lieutenant, a face innocent enough for one of our own New England boys. I could not think of him as a rebel. He was too near heaven for that. He wanted nothing, had not been willing to eat for days, his comrades said, but I coaxed him to try a little milk gruel made nicely with lemon and brandy. And one of the satisfactions of our 3 weeks is the remembrance of the empty cup I took away afterward, and his perfect enjoyment of that supper. It was so good, the best thing he had had since he was wounded. And he thanked me so much and talked about his good supper for hours. Poor creature. He had had no care, and it was a surprise and a pleasure to find himself thought of. So, in a pleased, childlike way, he talked about it till midnight, the attendant told me, as long as he spoke of anything, for at midnight the change came. And from that time, he only thought of the old days before he was a soldier, when he sang hymns in his father's church. He sang them now again in a clear, sweet voice. Lord, have mercy upon me. And then songs without words, a sort of low intoning. His father was a Lutheran clergyman in South Carolina. One of the rebels told us in the morning when we went to his tent to find him sliding out of our care. All day long we watched him, sometimes fighting his battles over, oftener singing his Lutheran chants, till in at the tent door, close to which he lay, looked a rebel soldier just arrived with other prisoners. He started when he saw the lieutenant, and, quickly kneeling down by him, called, Henry, Henry. But Henry was looking at someone a great way off and could not hear him. Do you know this soldier? We said. Oh, yes, ma'am. And his brother is wounded, and a prisoner too, in the cars now. 2 or 3 men started after him, found him, and half carried him from the cars to our tent. Henry did not know him, though, and the brother threw himself down by the side on the straw, and for the rest of the day lay in a sort of apathy, without speaking, except to assure himself that he could stay with his brother without the risk of being separated from his fellow prisoners. And there the brothers lay, and there we strangers sat, watching and listening to the strong, clear voice singing, Lord, have mercy upon me. The Lord had mercy, and at sunset, I put my hand on the lieutenant's heart to find it still. All night the brother lay close against the coffin, and in the morning went away with his comrades, leaving us to bury Henry, having confidence, but first thanking us for what we had done, and giving us all he had to show gratitude, the palmetto ornament from his brother's cap and a button from his coat. Dr. W. read the burial service that morning at the grave, and we wrote his name on the little headboard, Lieutenant Rauch, 14th Regiment, South Carolina Volunteers. In the field, we buried him. So there you have the story of a young South Carolina lieutenant mortally wounded the Battle of Gettysburg, Lieutenant Rauch of the 14th South Carolina Infantry, and the story told by Georgy Woolsey, a nurse who came with her mother to take care of the sick and wounded on both sides. Take care. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.